one of the trailblazers, I would say, for gender socialization. She's influenced by other theorists like Simone de Beauvoir, Julia Kristeva, Sigmund Freud, Derrida, and Foucault. She's written many books, but her work has had great impact in feminist theory, which is, I've heard of her through a feminist theory class. So she's an American post-structuralist philosopher who has contributed to fields of feminist philosophy, queer theory, political philosophy, and ethics. And the first book listed is Gender Trouble, and that's probably her most popular book. And this book is about the categories of sex and gender, and it really separates sex and gender, and defines gender as a social construct. The second book, I don't know.
It's right behind you. The white box is directly behind you. Yeah, just slide them down, both sides. Okay. Or click. Okay.
Okay. And so she defines gender as performative and regulative discourse. So the second book, Bodies That Matter, clears up readings, and then she goes forth to say that sex and gender is a performative daily choice. So in Gender Trouble, she says it's just performative and, kind of like people choose to be. But in the second book, she says it's really like, each moment your performativity defines who you are. It's something that's really fluid. It's not really like in a box. It's not solid, I guess. And then the third book is actually discusses problems of hate speech and censorship. It's a really good book, but she kind of goes for, she's kind of taking what she took from the first two books in gender and kind of taking it into, using words like fag and why hate speech is a problem, but then also talks about censorship and why we shouldn't censor hate speech. So that's what that book is about. Okay, so with Gender Trouble. What is gender? Does anyone want to offer a definition without looking at the handout? What you think gender is?
Gender, as far as I've known, gender is just what a person chooses to be identified as. Whether physically they have a penis or a vagina, or, if they have both, it's what they choose to be identified as.
Okay, and does anyone know what sex is? Does anyone want to give that a shot?
The organs, like the penis and the vagina, or both in that instance, and that's like pure biological state.
And how do you think these things affect and influence each other?
Well, people treat you different if you are born a certain way right off the bat, and everything that they buy you and how they treat you.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. Or I guess Okay, so I guess I'll explain gender. It's written on the sheet in front of you. So I wanted to talk about different aspects of gender. So gender status. Gender is a social status for individual people, a category that people belong to, such as girl, woman, boy, or man. Gender identity is a sense of oneself, such as I am woman, or I am boy, or I am feminine. Doing gender is what Judith Butler termed, and that's the practice of gender and accomplishment, the actions or behaviors that you do every day that identify your gender. Gender stratification is a system of stratification where different quantities and types of resources are granted to men/boys versus girls/women. So obviously someone would be more privileged that's a straight male rather than a queer female, for instance. And we're going to talk about cisgender privilege later. And then gender ideology and our gender norms. Gender exists as an ideology or set of beliefs, expectations, and stereotypes about what women, men, boys, and girls are, should do, can do, and so on. So sex. Biological sex refers to the objectively measurable organs forming from chromosomes. Did you know that there are more than two sexes? So if you refer to the worksheet, Anne Foster Sterling, she is a biologist and women's studies major, and she has a PhD in it. She works at Brown University. So basically her dissertation and her work was discovering different sets and types of chromosomal makeups. So she's done like tons and tons of research about it, and then what she found out is, even though technically there can be like infinite number of different sexes, there are 5 prominent ones that showed up the most, and those are listed. So you have male, which is male by any standard. Male pseudohermaphrodites, which predominantly male but have some female characteristics. Sometimes they'll have breast or wider set hips, different chromosomal makeups. Pure hermaphrodites, which are equally male and female, so both reproductive organs and both sets of chromosomes. Female pseudohermaphrodites, which are predominantly female but have some male characteristics, and then female by any standard. So this is the gender by person. Before, I was so happy I found this because I used to just draw like a stick figure and try to explain it. So this is awesome. So gender identity. I myself am genderqueer, so I fall in the middle of this spectrum. And gender identity is how you in your head think about it, about yourself, and it's the chemistry that composes you and how you interpret what that means. So identity is the brain. So that's kind of like the psychological, mental aspect of gender. Gender expression is how you express yourself physically. So I guess you could say I'm dressed like a female right now, expression. Some people tend to dress more androgynously. There's tons of different kinds, but it's the way you dress, act, behave, and interact. Biological sex. That's the hardware, I guess you would say. And then sexual orientation. You can be heterosexual, bisexual, pansexual, homosexual, tons of different sexual orientations, asexual, which is on the next slide. And none of these things, by the way, are related to each other in the sense that if you're, say, genderqueer, that doesn't mean that you're a lesbian. You can be genderqueer, express yourself as feminine, be a biological female, and be attracted to, well, I'm bisexual, so be attracted to male and female. None of these things, there's no formula for how these things should align with each other. It's not, gender doesn't work that way. So you can have millions of different combinations of these different things. However you choose to be. Okay. So next, masculine and feminine traits. So with the gender, with gender, there come different traits that are prescribed to different sexes. So females should act a certain way, and males should act a certain way. So there are prescriptions, which are things you should do, or society thinks you should do. And then there are proscriptions, is what society thinks you shouldn't do, or what you should not be. So I wanted to go through the themes of masculinity and themes of femininity, and maybe have you all read one if you want to go down the list. So anyone want to read the first theme of masculinity?
Anti-feminine element, no sissy stuff.
So you've probably heard this growing up, if any male deviated from the norm of doing sissy stuff, if you wanted to sew, or if you wanted to play with dolls, or dress up in female's clothing, you'd usually be reprimanded by either institutions like the school system, where your teacher would tell you not to play dress up, go play with the boys. Don't play with the girls, go play on the monkey bars. So no sissy stuff, that's one theme of femininity that society says you should adhere to. Anyone want to read the second one?
Success element, big wheel.
So there's also the theme of being a successful provider of the family, big wheel, man, and if you're not that, then there's obviously something wrong with you, because that's what you should be.
Self-reliance element, sturdy oak.
Right, so the sturdy oak no showing of emotions, you're self-reliant, you never need to ask anybody for help because that's not manly. It's basically, you know, keeping to yourself, being that strong masculine figure that doesn't need help from anyone else because you're completely self-reliant, and for you to think of asking anyone else for help is not manly.
The aggressive element, give them hell.
Right, so if you do feel emotions, the only emotion that you should feel is anger. So being an aggressive male, you know, competitive in the workforce, competitive at home, competitive everywhere. There's some handouts. Okay, and the last.
Sexual element, hormones and overdrive.
Right, so you're always supposed to be looking for your next conquest. Always supposed to be, you know, have a high libido because it's manly to sleep with as many girls as you want to. So themes of femininity.
Woman is deviant, woman is other.
So this ties into gender stratification and, you know, woman being the oppressed as compared to the female, which is the privileged. So just woman is the other.
Dependency and protected.
So being dependent on a man, being dependent on other people, being protected by other members of the community or other men in your family, that kind of idea.
Well, I'll read the other one, but I actually had a question on the
Oh.
first one.
Okay.
For the woman is other, you were saying, or are you saying there's a difference between how people will say female versus woman? Or what you said that there
Female versus male. So
Okay.
it's female as an other to male, which would be the privileged person.
Okay. Cool. Alright, never mind. I guess I misheard something.
I think she said that female was privileged, but she meant male.
Oh,
Oh,
okay,
okay.
sorry. I didn't catch that.
So nurturance, caring.
So being the caring mother, growing up to be a nurturer of others. Not all females are nurturers and shouldn't be expected of us.
Sexual dilemma, hormones in check.
So this is kind of one of the paradoxical, oxymoronic themes of femininity. You know, your hormones have to be in check because you can't be too promiscuous or else you're a slut, and you can't be too prude or else you're like frigid. So it's kind of like your hormones have to be completely in check in this, you know, little tiny box where you're completely sexually okay. It's a dilemma. And last.
Ambivalence of success, smart versus social dilemma.
So it's another paradoxical dilemma, just like the previous one. You have to be social enough, yet, you know, get straight A's in school. You're kind of expected to be this perfect, in our case, you know, the perfect collegiate female that still has fun with friends and still manages to get straight A's. And I think it's kind of silly that these traits are prescribed to females and not males. So, would you prescribe any of these traits or characteristics to your personal identity?
Well, I mean, on the one thing that I've observed happens a lot is, you know, say you'll be driving and you're going to make a left turn and there's cars coming, and then, you know, sometimes people will be quick to say like, oh, make the turn. Are you a bitch?
Right.
You know, and then be like, well, rather not kill everyone in the car, but, you know, I'll take my time on the turn. I notice like people will resort to that if they, I'm not sure if it's like a power struggle thing, if they feel like they're, you know, making themselves above you because they would have done that or something, but
Right.
yeah, it happens a lot.
I definitely consider myself really feminine, but I think the way that I conceive of that is different than how a lot of people conceive of what that means. For example, I don't shave my legs, and I think that's super feminine. And so, I don't know, I guess whenever people ask, I tell people that, and they say, well, what does feminine mean to you? I really hesitate to, like, describe what that means because I don't want to ascribe any, like, essential kind of characteristics to what that means, and I don't know, I'm feminine and feminine is me, I guess.
Oh, like I can totally see myself as like the nurturing type, but I don't know if that is like just because that's me, or if that's like something that's kind of been like prescribed to me like at an early age, like, as like a being nurturing. But yeah, I don't think so.
Brian had his hand up.
Yeah, I remember when I was pledging for my fraternity, one of the things is you go around and you have to interview brothers, and you have to ask like 20 questions and they get to know you. And so one of my questions was, do you believe in fate? And I got like reamed out for that. Like they were really mad. So apparently there's certain things like, actually I don't know if this goes to any of the elements. But I'm sure it does somehow. It's just, I don't know.
Which was it? Were you supposed to believe in fate, or was it?
He asked me if I was gay.
What?
Oh,
Yeah.
What?
Doesn't that
Because
make
you asked
sense?
that question?
Yeah.
So like if you asked a
Hold on.
question that didn't have to do with like booze or like masculinity, it was like a somewhat sentimental question.
Right, I guess because it was sentimental.
Because it was an
Not about
abstract
lifting weights.
concept. That
It goes against the self-reliance element.
Yeah, there you go.
That's interesting.
I was just going to say that I guess in my family, my mom is definitely fits a lot of almost like masculine things. She's not like a masculine, well, I don't want to do any stereotypes, but anyway, she's definitely the big wheel in the family, I'd say, in the way that she's definitely the provider, and she's also the sturdy oak, I would say. And so, and my dad, in a lot of ways, is much more the nurturing kind, and so I guess in some ways that definitely affects personality traits of my own and what I kind of see. And I don't know, it's kind of been difficult for me sometimes growing up pertaining to certain stereotypes as far as that's concerned. So,
I just realized something with the sexual element and sexual dilemma, that the hormones of an overdrive versus the hormones in check, and just for example, like we're in college, so sometimes people just have sex,
Right.
and it's a lot of times obviously like the female has a lot of sex, she's a slut. The male has a lot of sex, he's doing what he's supposed to do, but they're focusing more on the social element versus like the health of if you just go around having sex, people are protected, that's just not healthy, versus but there's more focus on the social aspect, versus I guess the health.
Sorry, I know I already talked, but I've been thinking a lot lately about like masculine pecking order and like alpha males and that kind of thing, and it just is occurring to me more and more how hard it must be to grow up being a boy, not being traditionally masculine, and how you're like, even in some instances, if you're feminine and you're a female, that's okay because you're expected to be that. But if you have like, if you don't play sports, or if you're not very muscular, or whatever it is that like people expect of you, then it must be really hard to try and live up to that and to be punished for that.
I think that I'm dependent, like emotionally and financially, and that like it's very stressful for me because I try very hard to be independent, and I feel like that like the people in my life like they like work very hard to be supportive of me financially, and so like for instance my mother is constantly giving me money, and I'm like, no, don't give me money because it's stressful, and but then like for instance my boyfriend is also just as financially dependent on his parents as I am, and I feel like it's not okay for me to be dependent, but it is okay for them.
I really like discussing human sexuality. I find it really fascinating in general. And I've had this interest since like middle school for a while now. And sometimes I don't really worry, but I consider that I'm being labeled by men especially as sort of just perverted or lewd, just because I find sexuality fascinating. And I feel okay discussing. I feel like sexuality it shouldn't be repressed in any way because it's one of the most deviant ways of expressing ourselves that we can have. It's sexuality. It's so primal and animal. So yeah, I just feel like sometimes I'm being judged for being a woman and for being so sexually. I feel like I'm sexually liberated, or I try to be.
sorry, just one more thing. I like totally understand what you mean. I've always been like, you know, like since like, yeah, a really young age, like, interested in like sexuality, and like I feel like when I try to talk to, if I talk to like females about it, you know, stuff that I'm interested in, it's like, oh, okay, like let's stop talking about that. You're making me feel awkward. And then if I talk to like, you know, predominantly mostly men about it, it's like, oh, that girl. Oh man, let me get her number. Like it's really awkward. I don't know. It's just a really, it kind of goes with like the hormones in check thing. If you're interested in sex, or you know, have a lot of sex, you're trying to fit into that middle mold.
I feel like the female sexual dilemma and women's deviant really like intersect because you're kind of taught that female sexuality is just a tangent of male sexuality. And it's supposed to cater to male sexuality, and it makes it awkward growing up as a girl because you don't know where you're supposed to fit in the thing.
So I also wanted to point out that all these traits that we just listed are hegemonic traits. And so they're hegemonic masculine and hegemonic feminine traits. And that means that they are the dominant traits in a given society, social context, or historical period. So by any means, these are not right traits. They're just the socially dominant traits that are happening right now. Okay, so institutions where these traits are learned and enforced. So, for example, elementary, middle, and high schools, government and politicians or laws that are being passed, libraries, because there's not, if you ever want to find like, you know, a queer theory section or a children's book that isn't completely cisgendered, you'll probably find it really difficult. Public restrooms and locker rooms, you know, gendered, male, female. Transportation systems, there has been cases recently, if you go to the airport, you know, and you happen to be transgender or intersex, you run into problems and you get your gender questioned. But so that's another example of cisgendered privilege. Like, you know, most people don't think about that when they're going through their daily lives. The workforce. Oh.
I mean, you're talking about like with like searches and with the scanner and stuff like that.
Right.
It would be really stressful. I would imagine.
The workforce. Medical institutions, hospitals, and insurance companies, and the prison system. So I wanted to go to this website that's really awesome, called It's Pronounced Metrosexual, and these are 30 examples of cisgendered privilege, so things that you probably wouldn't think about on a day-to-day basis, but I'll read a couple of them. So this is privilege that we have as a cisgender, or I don't really have that privilege. So a cisgendered person, maybe I should define that. A cisgender person is someone who identifies themselves as the gender or sex they were assigned at birth. For example, if your birth certificate says female and you identified as a woman or female, you're cisgender. So, use of public restrooms without fear of verbal abuse or physical intimidation or arrest. Use of public facilities such as a gym, locker rooms, and store changing rooms without stares or fear or anxiety. Strangers don't assume they can look at you and ask you what your genitals look like and how you have sex. Your validity as a man, woman, or human is not based on how much surgery you've had or how you pass as a non-transgender. You have the ability to walk through the world and generally blend in, not being constantly stared or gawked at, whispered about, pointed at, or laughed at because of your gender expression. You can access gender-exclusive spaces such as the Michigan Women's Music Festival, Greek Life, or Take Back the Night and not be excluded due to your trans status. Strangers call you by the name you provide and don't ask for your real name, what your real name is, and then assume that they have the right to call you by that name. You can reasonably assume that your ability to acquire a job or rent an apartment or secure a loan will not be denied on the basis of your gender identity or expression. You have the ability to flirt, engage in courtship, or form a relationship and not fear that your biological status may cause for rejection or attack, nor will it cause your partner to question their sexual orientation. If you end up in an emergency room, you do not have to worry that your gender will keep you from receiving appropriate treatment or that all your medical issues will be seen as a result of your gender. Your identity is not considered a mental pathology by the psychological and medical establishments. So there's tons and tons. So this is a list of 30. I'm not going to go through all of them. But just examples of cisgender privilege. Like, these are things that we don't think about normally. Most people don't really think about these things. Yet people that fall outside of the norm have to think about these things all the time, every day, every second of the day. Through all of their social interactions in public spaces. It makes it really, really difficult. So I just wanted to point it out and just make you all aware that people that fall outside of the gender norms deal with these things too. So any comments or questions about that? Okay. So did anyone ever think of those things?
Not that in depth. Not that in depth.
Yeah. Okay, so media and social influences. So first I'm going to play this.
Sometimes people say to me, "You've been talking about this for 40 years. Have things gotten any better?" And actually, I have to say, really, they've gotten worse. Ads sell more than products. They sell values, they sell images, they sell concepts of love and sexuality, of success, and perhaps most important, of normalcy. To a great extent, they tell us who we are and who we should be. Well, what does advertising tell us about women? It tells us, as it always has, that what's most important is how we look. So the first thing the advertisers do is surround us with the image of ideal female beauty. Women learn from a very early age that we must spend enormous amounts of time, energy, and above all money striving to achieve this look and feeling ashamed and guilty when we fail. And failure is inevitable because the ideal is based on absolute flawlessness. She never has any lines or wrinkles. She certainly has no scars or blemishes. Indeed, she has no pores. And the most important aspect of this flawlessness is that it cannot be achieved. No one looks like this, including her. And this is the truth. No one looks like this. The supermodel Cindy Crawford once said, "I wish I looked like Cindy." She doesn't. She couldn't. Because this is a look that's been created for years through airbrushing and cosmetics, but these days it's done through the magic of computer retouching. Keira Knightley is given a bigger bust. Jessica Alba is made smaller. Kelly Clarkson, well, this isn't interesting. It says slim down your way, but she in fact slimmed down the Photoshop way. You almost never see a photograph of a woman considered beautiful that hasn't been Photoshopped. We all grow up in a culture in which women's bodies are constantly turned into things, into objects. Here she's become the bottle of Michelob. In this ad, she becomes part of a video game. And this is everywhere, in all kinds of advertising. Women's bodies turned into things, into objects. Now, of course, this affects female self-esteem. It also does something even more insidious. It creates a climate in which there's widespread violence against women. I'm not at all saying that an ad like this directly causes violence. It's not that simple. But turning a human being into a thing is almost always the first step toward justifying violence against that person. We see this with racism, we see it with homophobia, we see it with terrorism. It's always the same process. The person is dehumanized and violence then becomes inevitable. And that step is already and constantly taken with women. Women's bodies are dismembered in ads, hacked apart. Just one part of the body is focused upon, which of course is the most dehumanizing thing you could do to someone. Everywhere we look, women's bodies turned into things and often just parts of things. And girls are getting the message these days so young that they need to be impossibly beautiful, hot, sexy, extremely thin, and they also get the message that they're going to fail, that there's no way to really achieve it. Girls tend to feel fine about themselves when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, but they hit adolescence and they hit a wall. And certainly part of this wall is this terrible emphasis on physical perfection. So no wonder we have an epidemic of eating disorders in our country and increasingly throughout the world. I've been talking about this for a very long time, and I keep thinking that the models can't get any thinner, but they do. They get thinner and thinner and thinner. This is Anna Carolina Reston, who died a year ago of anorexia, weighing 88 pounds, and at the time she was still modeling. So the models literally cannot get any thinner. So Photoshop is brought to the rescue. There are exceptions, however. Kate Winslet has been outspoken about her refusal to allow Hollywood to dictate her weight. When British GQ magazine published this photograph of Winslet, which was digitally enhanced to make her look dramatically thinner, she issued a statement that the alterations were made without her consent. And she said, "I don't look like that, and more importantly, I don't desire to look like that. I can tell you that they've reduced the size of my legs by about 1/3. Bless her heart. So what can we do about all of this? Well, the first step is to become aware, to pay attention, and to recognize that this affects all of us. These are public health problems that I'm talking about. The obsession with thinness is a public health problem. The tyranny of the ideal image of beauty, violence against women, these are all public health problems that affect us all. And public health problems can only be solved by changing the environment.
So I wanted to have a quick discussion about that before I show the other two videos.
I was just, when I was watching it, it made me think of something. A couple of months ago, I was watching Wendy Williams, and she was talking about this movie that it's Jennifer Love Hewitt was in, and the picture that they had for the movie was her, and she's well endowed, and they actually edited her breasts to make them smaller. And I think it kind of, in a way, relates to what she's talking about, because women, I guess, in media are made to look, thinner in certain areas, but at the same time, they can't be too feminine because that's too sexual and it's not appropriate for this mainstream society. So it's just something I thought of.
Anyone else?
Like I like totally growing up as like a really poor kid from a young age, like the financial kind of like seeing these images makes constantly feel like, oh, I need this, I need the makeup so that I look like everyone else, I need clothes, and stuff like that. And I always remember, and I never really thought about it then because I was too young, but I was young, like, Mom, I need this shit, I need this makeup, I need this bra, I need this, and it wasn't because I wanted, really, any of that shit. I'm sorry, but it was just because, seeing all these things, even back to school ads, like the JCPenney's, all the kids are dancing around and stuff, it's all fun and games, but you're looking at that's stuff that only half of America or less can afford,
I don't know if anyone else has noticed this with advertising, but it seems to be that it's been more of a race to the bottom. She talks about the objectification of women and how that's always kind of been a theme in advertising. But what I've noticed is that it's gone from just it being women to also men. You see a lot of these images now of the guy being objectified. And I'm not saying that either one of those is good, but it's been sort of the opposite of what we wanted, which is to get that sort of thing out of advertising and that sort of thing out of the public sphere of, no, we're not going to accept this portrayal of humans. Now we're saying, well, let's just have it for both, because why not? Race to the bottom. But I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but it's disheartening.
Okay. I just noticed in advertising, like you were saying, it definitely has taken a turn towards both male and female, but that might also be opportunity for, people among cis group, I guess, to make advertising that represents us more so than those. And maybe that brings up another question. Do you think it's bad just in general that there's one image of a certain person put on an advertisement? So is that bad, even though they're representing a more, I guess, well, you can't even really say more general person. Just in general, if you're showing an image of one person, it's, I guess, impossible to differentiate beyond that if you don't look at it outside mediums. But.
Well, definitely a lot of people in this crowd would go along the lines of fuck advertising altogether. We shouldn't need it, but it should be a race towards ideals that I think are gender neutral in a sense, like, instead of that woman being the Michelob bottle, like, why doesn't it, you know, I don't even think those types of things should be advertised. That's a bad point. But I mean, if you're going to advertise something, it should be something along the lines of like a positive thing that anyone can strive for, without the need for cliches and old world kind of thing. Sorry.
I was just going to say, as far as women in advertising go, that one talks a lot about like objectification, but I think a big problem is like representation of women as nurturers. Like it's all the cleaning product commercials, it's always moms. Cleaning out that for their messy family. It's just, I think that's really bad.
Which is a theme of femininity, so it's going back to reinforcing those themes.
I was just thinking it's funny that we're like using people to sell things. Like you see a 30-second commercial for like a beverage, and you see the beverage for like half a second. You know, sometimes people like living impossible lives and stuff. And it's the same for like every product, no matter what it is. It's always like people will buy this, and then you know your life will be like this if you have this one. I don't know.
I was going to say it just seems to tie back to consumerism in so many ways, and the fact, you know, it's kind of ironic because it makes you feel like crap about yourself by looking at these really ridiculously thin women, but at the same time it's almost like masochistic in a way that you want to go out and then buy those things to make yourself feel better.
And we will talk, so it's a form of internal colonization. We're going to talk about that later, a little bit later. I think he had a saying.
I think it's also important to realize that it's not only gender issues that are objectified, but pretty much every facet of our lives are like excised from like reality and put in this abstract commercial reality that we're gonna like use your idea of family to sell you this, or we're gonna use your idea of sex to sell you this. And it's just pretty much everything you can think of that you know are real and tangible things that affect you every day that are just sucked out of like reality and like put in this commercial bubble and just thrown at you at 1,000,000 miles per hour constantly on the screen. So it's not only based on gender lines, but it's also based on just your real life.
I was thinking, I mean, like, I hate television. I despise advertising, especially in television, because, like, you're trying to watch a good show, and you're like, wow, I'm getting to the show, it's kind of fun. And it's like, man, advertising, and I want to vomit. That's really how I feel about it. But when you know, dinner, family watching TV, you know, watching the advertisements, a lot of them really, they use, oftentimes women's vulnerability, their self-consciousness, their hyper-awareness of their flaws to try to sell them things. It's like, especially, okay, I'm Cuban, so we'd be watching, you know, television in Spanish. And I don't know if anyone here is Hispanic or you watch TV that's in Spanish, but the commercials are really cheap and horrible commercials, and I'm not kidding, or at least the channels that we happen to be watching, and they don't even try to subtly make you feel like shit about yourself so that you buy this product. It's like, are you tired of being fat and ugly? Buy this. Like they don't try to. I'm not kidding. It's that bad. Yeah. So the images just are meant to make you feel like shit, and I'm afraid that a lot of the times, for the people, the demographic that they're advertising to, unfortunately, it might be working.
Right.
So.
You guys really.
I was just gonna say, yeah, echoing the comments about consumerism, like that video made me reinforce just how interwoven sexism is with capitalism.
So these two next commercials, I'm going to just play them back to back. And then you've probably seen this already.
Hey, ladies. Enjoying the film? Of course not. Because this is our movie! And Dr. Pepper 10 is our soda. It's only 10 manly calories, but with all 23 flavors of Dr. Pepper. It's what guys want, like this. Trays. So you can keep the romantic comedies and lady drinks. We're good. Dr. Pepper 10, it's not for women!
And then next commercial, so this commercial is aired in Japan, and it got taken off, so it was banned, and you'll see why. There's lots of backlash.
That's the creative. not authority, but voice.
So in the case that there is a commercial that, tries to blur gender norms, tons of backlash in Japan, got taken off the air immediately after it aired. Politicians came forth and said it was inappropriate for family members. And I'm like into Japanese culture, but I don't know if you've ever seen like Wipeout or those shows where they'll have like a girl dressed in an itsy bitsy teeny bikini, and she's like, they do something and then she'll like jiggle on the thing or whatever. Like they have those types of things, but something comes forth like this that's a little bit more progressive and trying to blur gender norms, and then it just gets taken off as soon as it's aired. So any thoughts on those two commercials just aired?
Okay, so I know it's like I know exactly what you're talking about with the Japanese shows. Like I think once I watched a show where like this fat, hairy, middle-aged man was like rolling over like a line of women and they were in bikinis. So yeah, it's very ironic that they've got this and they're saying that they're trying to be progressive and they're saying, oh, it's not family appropriate, but then you have these shows that are very sexual. And what's more family appropriate than being honest and plain about the differences in human sexuality and human gender? So, yeah.
Right, and I think part of the reason that a lot of men were mad about this especially is
they were
so
deceived?
yeah, I want to ask any of the people in here that would consider themselves males what you thought of this. If you haven't seen it before, what were your reactions?
I mean, I'm a gay male, but honestly, when he turned around, I was like, at first, my first thought was, oh, it's a woman that has had a double mastectomy. And then I was like, no, that's a man. And I was like, something inside me it was like, it felt kind of weird, but I can imagine being a straight man in a traditional culture like Japan or ours, seeing that, and it's no surprise to me whatsoever that it got taken off immediately, because no one, like a million men feeling really like confused about their sexuality all at once, like something bad. So I mean, it was an amazing commercial though. It was really like intense, but I'm not surprised.
I still think she's a woman. I don't think she's a man. I think she's just a small-chested woman. And I'm trying to. I can't read the text, of course, but I think part of the play on the commercial is the fact that she's a small-chested woman, and you're going to expect, like on TV, you already come to expect just like a big pair of boobs,
So his name's actually Andrei Puget,
Oh,
and
so I'm
he's
wrong.
actually a Russian male.
Wow.
And we're going to watch an
Now I
interview
feel
after
confused.
this.
So I'll go out on a limb quickly here. Well, okay, maybe not quickly, but I'm pretty good at spotting, so like I could tell that was a male just by the shape of the ass, yeah, like a cat, and the Adam's apple and the hairstyle. I could definitely tell it was male. Is it attractive to me? Yeah, but would I sleep with him or her? Maybe. I mean, that's me, but I can see why a lot of guys would be like, oh, damn, like they would feel deceived by that. So yeah, I mean, it got taken off the air because of homophobia in Japan. Okay, that's what I was curious about.
Well, do you think even ads like that, is that portraying that, if someone was transgender, is that portraying an ideal transgender look? Could that be, well, I don't know, I'm just saying, I guess, as far as, do you think that even that, like a commercial like that, would that, I guess, that has the potential to be, I guess, something that can perpetuate stereotypes as well, that, homosexuals or transgender people are like that every time or something.
Yeah, in any case of advertising, I would say this is another ideal, just, it's kind of still the same thing that most people can't reach, kind of ideal type of thing. So I would say, like, yes, if there were tons of trans commercials, which I doubt there would ever be, that there could be an ideal or stereotype that would be, pushed forth through media. But I mean, I've never seen another commercial with that was trying to do this.
Well, I thought it was interesting because, like, they're saying that you're deceived, so, you're a guy watching this, and you're like, this chick is hot, and then you turn around, and it's not a woman, and so you were attracted to this man, and so, I mean, are you attracted to females or men, or are you attracted to makeup and the hair and and the things that are being sold to you.
Cece.
I'm really confused about what this commercial is trying to say. And I'm just wondering if anybody could explain it to me. Like, why is it authority, not Horus, and what does that have to do with a transgender person?
Maybe
trans is going to be like a direct opposition to authority because we live in like a binary system. You could go about it that way. I don't know. I think they were just trying to see magic.
I think they're just trying to go for shine.
Yeah, like, oh, this bar is chocolate.
So,
I don't know if it would have anything to do with, I don't know much, to be honest, I don't know much about anything besides the heterosexual culture, unfortunately. I'm still getting to know all of these vocab words and stuff and like straightening out my transgender and transsexual and all that stuff. But I don't know if it would have anything to do with the fact that in the Japanese culture, it seems like gender is becoming more often blurred. Women are kind of attracted to very feminine-looking boys, and they do have like the rock bands where they cross-dress and stuff. And you know, a lot of Japanese boys look very feminine, and you can't tell if it's a man or a woman. Often the vocals, it's like this is a man singing soprano, he sounds like a woman, and he's dressing like a woman, and it's like, what are you getting here? So I don't know if it has anything to do with that aspect of the Japanese culture.
it's really bad. So it's already been an hour, and I always do this. Oh, I just go on forever, but so I guess I'll try to keep it moving and play this next video. So this is Andre Bouchet, and he's going to be speaking to us.
Kind of took me on. So let's see what needs to be found.
And then it's been a whirlwind ever since.
Yeah.
So when I look at you, I see an absolutely beautiful, ridiculously tall, lean, gorgeous woman.
Well, thank you.
So the question is, do you identify yourself as a woman?
For me, it's not that important. I mean, if someone asks me, do I refer to as a boy or a girl? I'm not offended if they refer to me as a girl, but you know, I'll tell them, oh, you know, refer to me as a boy. But at this point, you know, my career is based on gender fluidity, and you know, I do like to play with that, more than just you know, artistic level. I like to play with it in daily life. So yeah, at the end of the day, you know, for me, it's, the definition isn't so strong.
Your movements are very feminine, and I'm wondering if that's because you're dressed. Well, you're dressed manly and womanly at the same time. You've got.
What today's fashion really is, I think, definitely moving into a very unisex direction. You know, I think this is a good example of that.
So if we take it away from fashion though and into a bigger realm, the idea, if we take it out of fashion into sort of a bigger realm, and we see there's always been two genders. There is male and there is female. Do you think there's a third gender?
I think there's always been male and female, and there's always been in between. It's just the in between doesn't have a place so much. But you know, I think if gender wasn't so important, if it didn't affect the way people treated you, or the opportunities you have in life, like nationality or anything else, it wouldn't be such a big deal. The in between, you know, someone wanting to explore the in between, or place themselves in between.
Do you feel different when you dress as just a boy? Without the makeup, without the hair done and the headband on?
I mean, for me, I don't put on costumes. I mean, when I take all that off, I still feel very comfortable with myself. I would probably wouldn't feel, if I was extremely masculine and hairy, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable. So with me, I'm quite lucky that how I feel inside pretty much matches what I look like outside. And a lot of people, there are a lot of people that don't get that.
How do you explain that to them? There will be people who will identify you as a cross-dresser. Are you a cross-dresser?
A cross-dresser is usually a male for someone who's supposed for sexual arousal. I don't get sexually aroused when I put women's clothes on. That's, cross-dressing translates like the same thing.
You're just a little bit of both. You are a bit boy and a bit girl, and together that makes Andre?
Yeah, it sometimes can. But, gender doesn't make me cry out. I don't think you can subdue your whole character to your gender. But sometimes people are like, well, you don't know what you are. Like, almost like your whole humanity disappears when your gender does, But I think there's more to human being.
So do you love boys or do you love girls?
I love love. In all shapes and in all forms.
So that the fluidity that we see in the way you present yourself extends to your sexuality as well?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a very sexual person. But I am emotional. I mean, I do believe in love. And I'm definitely open to it. From both sides.
Australia, your homeland, recently made a decision that Australia recently took steps that sort of exemplifies from a paper pusher sort of a way what you represent in a fashion world, which is extending a third tick on the box of gender. Were you following that at all?
I recently learned of it, which is surprising because I feel like I shouldn't be on top of this, especially with Australia and the issue. But it's definitely a step forward. I wouldn't say it's a huge step forward, but it's definitely a step forward. In the right direction. Because transgender people or intersex people do suffer from a lack of legal protection and representation. So yeah, it does. I think it's something that would make life easier, and it wouldn't make life harder for the rest of the population. So I don't see why it hasn't happened before, and why it should be enforced everywhere else in the world.
Do you think we make too big of a deal of defining someone by their gender?
Definitely, but I think that's one of the flaws of society. We like to define someone on their race or on their gender or on their appearance, all things that really aren't the biggest part of a person's soul-being.
Do you wish you were a girl?
Well, if I wanted to be a girl, what would I have to change?
So there's no desire. You didn't grow up wishing you were a girl.
Well, I definitely grew up, playing with girls and playing girly things and wanting to look pretty. And then, now I can do all those things. So,
okay,
what is being a woman at the end of the day?
What is being a woman at the end of the day? You think we're too hung up on sort of the anatomical?
Yeah, I think, that definitely hang up on the what's downstairs.
So, do you agree with Andre's views on gender?
Yeah, I do for sure. And I think one thing that he was saying, or one thing the interviewer asked is if she thinks that people are spending too much time defining whether it's male or female, and I feel like that could be, parallels can be drawn in that to a lot of categories where people just want one word to be associated with someone instead of looking at it from a yin and yang perspective of the balance. So I think it's onto something very good right there.
I felt so bad for Andre during that interview.
Yeah.
I just felt like the interviewer just kept trying to categorize. I'm like, well, did you ever wish you could be a girl? Like, her word choice is just really aggravating. And he was just trying to be like, and I noticed at the very end, the thing that he was most enthusiastic about was her question on, like, do you think it matters, like, what's downstairs? He's like, yeah, like, no. But, yeah.
I actually thought it was really interesting because I spent some time in Australia about a year ago, and people are very homophobic there. Like, I was really surprised to hear about the other, because all the people that I talked to were super like, it's so gay, and like that's like just so homophobic that it shocked me, and so I was surprised to see that.
I guess kind of to piggyback off what you were saying, I think maybe the reason why she was, as you say, trying to put him in him in a box was because I think she felt less feminine when she's around him, because if you notice, like, she has to pull the chair out and she's like, oh yeah, you're this tall, beautiful woman, and she's kind of going along that he was hitting all the points of what a beautiful woman is. She's like, oh, you're tall, you're beautiful, and she probably just felt less feminine, so maybe she wanted to, I guess, get exactly what he was.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Andre, because I just don't understand. I'm always really surprised by the abundance of ignorance that exists in the world. And I don't know, when, like, in the last slide was asked, I think someone like, do you identify with any of the traits associated with your gender? And I'm just like, no, because I don't understand why traits have ever been associated with genders. Like, women are, I don't know, more caring and men are more intelligent. It's like, I think I'm intelligent, I think I'm caring. I don't think it has anything to do with what, gender or sex I am. And there are some, like, obvious things that, are sex-oriented, like certain diseases are more prone to happen in males because of the, genes that they're related to. Men have things that women don't, like, anatomically, and vice versa. But I don't know, personality traits is just like, why would you ever associate that with the gender? And I feel the same way when I'm asked, because I'm Hispanic, if you identify with, like, being Hispanic or being Cuban. And I'm like, in like the very specific like way that yes, I am Hispanic, and yeah, I guess if you want to get more specific, I'm Cuban, I do, but those are things like never occur to me. It's also like weird when people ask like, I don't know, like you'll hear someone telling a story or something, and they'll specifically mention that the person was black or that the person was a woman, and you're just like, I don't see why that mattered at all. Like, why did you bring it up? And it's understandable to, like, again, a descriptive degree. Like, you want to visualize the person that we're talking about, and it's like, oh, this is Hispanic female, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I can a little bit more somewhat see it, but I don't know, gender is such a non-thing to me. Like, describe yourself be as you want to be. I don't understand why it matters to anybody.
Okay. So why do you think society has reacted so negatively to Andre?
Because I think a lot of, just like the Toyota ad, I feel like a lot of males, if you saw that woman across the bar, you'd be like, damn, that's a beautiful woman. Like, and then when they find out that he's got a penis, it would be like, they feel threatened. Their sexuality is like, is threatened.
For violent.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think people really fear what they don't understand at all. And I feel like people have this mindset that whatever they grew up with or whatever they've always been taught is the right thing. And I just think that clouds a lot of people's, just opinions and just it limits them in that perspective.
Kind of similar to your comment, I think that like when people grow up and have this gender like sometimes quite literally beaten into them, and then they see somebody else who's defying that, I think there's this sense of like, why do you get to, you know, transcend these norms that I was so firmly kept to, and it's like unfair almost. It's like, I'm going to teach you this lesson that I had to learn just because of the fact that I had to learn it.
I'm getting, sorry, just like the time thing, because I have a lot more that I want to go over. Is everyone cool to say is like does anyone have any time issues?
Nope.
No?
The only thing is the camera battery's gonna die, but it's alright.
Okay. I was just, you know, taking your time into account. Okay, so I guess next question. Do you think more models like Andrea should be able to model without public scrutiny?
I mean, we say public scrutiny and that Andre's being treated negatively, but like, we're watching his video and we're learning about gender and why it's not important, things like that, because Andre is in the public light and doesn't fit into the standard norms that we have. So, I mean, I can't answer that question without like questioning the question, because I'm glad that we're scrutinizing Andre, because if people weren't curious and didn't ask questions, it would never get talked about.
And like you were saying, the conflict itself, the backlash to this brings, in turn, more awareness of it. So yeah, I think that it should be more prevalent, more advertisement showing, individuals like this that are not immediately perceived as male or female. I think it's progressive. I think it's a great thing.
Anyone else? Okay. So, self-governance. Now we're getting into the theory of Foucault, Butler part of it. Okay, so this is a panopticon, and I'm pretty sure this one's located in Cuba. So, to explain, so Foucault and Judith Butler theory of self-governance stems from this prison, it's a prison complex that was really popular in Latin America during the early 1900s. And so the way that it works is there's no more bars on them anymore because I guess they took them out over time. Like this is really old jail. But so all of these are inmate cells, and in the middle this is a guard tower stand. So usually the guard tower stand, you see it's very darkly lit. You couldn't really tell if someone was in there or not. So it's a 360 degree thing. So this is a circle, like it would continue all the way around. And so you can, if you were a prisoner in this prison, you would be able to look across and see people on not on either side of you, but basically the whole rest of the circle if the guard tower wasn't in your way. So the way that it worked is the first couple of months they would have one guard stationed in the guard tower, because the guard tower also goes 360 degrees around. So if any inmate acted outside of the norm or did anything violent or something that he or she wasn't allowed to do, they would get shot and then died, and everyone else saw it. So they would only have to kill people a couple of times until the other prisoners would get on each other to not act, don't act out, or else you're going to get shot. So then eventually there didn't have to be a guard in the guard tower. They just took the guard out, and there was no guard in the guard tower. The inmates were just self-governing themselves and governing each other to the point where they were like, I'm not going to do anything because I'm going to get shot. So that's this whole idea of self-governance stemmed from this model of a prison. Okay, so more about self-governance. So it goes from communities, which would be the norm, I guess, self-governance within communities, within states, laws. So let's use America as an example. Our panopticon, I would say, is society, and we have cops, that kill some people or arrest people, and then we self-govern each other. If someone does something out of norm, someone calls a cop, so a cop gets there and then takes care of that person. Or if you take it down to a school, let's say the school, you have teachers and principals that govern students. Or you can say SGA to an extent can govern students and kind of call them out. And then you can take it down to like a family unit. You have your parents, maybe siblings call each other out. Hey, don't do that. You're gonna get in trouble. Mom's gonna get you in trouble. And then you take that down to the person. Oh, I need to regulate my behavior because I know if I do this, people are gonna think that I shouldn't be doing that. Or if I express myself a certain way, I'm gonna get reprimanded because of it. So then, this is where it becomes an internal self-governance. Or then it even goes to your mind, like your brain, maybe with that Toyota commercial. Oh, I think that woman's attractive, but wait, I can't think she's attractive because he's actually a guy, So even self-regulating thoughts, it goes down to the individual level where you're even thinking about it. So I wanted to define colonization, which is on your little handout, and says a violent process through which one nation state takes political and economic control over another nation state or indigenous society, exploits its resources, administers or governs locally, and actively populates the region with its own citizens. So the idea of internal colonization is basically that you're doing this to yourself and to your own thoughts and to your own actions and to your own, like anything that you're thinking or perceiving. Your society has taught you to become internally colonizing. So these things can become extremely detrimental to a person's health. If you've been taught something your whole entire life and then you self-regulate yourself to the point where you won't allow yourself to be the person that you want to be until you kind of break down those ideals of self-governing structures that have been put, inside of you since you were really little. So with that, I wanted to talk about Irving Goffman, and he's a sociologist and a dramaturgical analysis, and he is really influenced by Judith Butler with performativity. So there's these terms which are also on your little handout. So dramaturgy is looking at social life and social interactions as a stage. So kind of like performing in a theater, like all of everything that's happening is on a stage. Like I'm on a stage right now, you're on a stage. So impression management is our efforts to manage the impressions that others receive of us. So that ties into self-governance. Like I am going to act and express myself a certain way because I'm trying to manage the impression that others perceive me as. So, I'm going to act away because I don't want to be seen as a weirdo or something. I'm trying to put, it's kind of like that self-governance that ties into it. And then front stage, this is all from his theory, by the way. So front stage, he considers like where we deliver our lines when we're in the public sphere. Sometimes even when we're at home with our families, we're not the same person that we are when we're by ourselves, which is backstage, where we retreat and relax. Your safe haven. It could be by yourself, maybe it could be in your house. You feel comfortable in your house, you would do things there that you wouldn't do in public. So those terms are those. Okay. So we talked about self-governance, colonization, internal colonization. Okay. Any questions or comments or thoughts about self-governance and how you have either governed yourself in the past or you've noticed, any type of governing going on around you?
Well, yeah, and kind of relates to the topic, but as a kid growing up in average city America, other kids around school will say that something that's stupid is gay. And so you get used to kind of saying that, and then until you kind of realize why that's wrong, you have to sort of self-regulate yourself or self-govern yourself to go, dude, that's horribly offensive, don't say that. And so when something's stupid, you just say it's stupid.
Anyone else? Well, I knew that before I was comfortable with my own sexuality, I I knew that I was really like self-governing my thoughts. Like before I was comfortable with being queer and being attracted to both sexes, I would, think to myself like, oh, like, like, what's my sexuality? Or what am I thinking? Like, I shouldn't be thinking that. And it used to be like, so my backstage was my house or my head or whatever. Like, my close friends knew, my parents didn't know. So some people knew. I would present myself to the world as a cisgendered female, and when I finally got over that idea of normalcy and that not mattering, and when I learned about it, I kind of made everything my backstage, because I'm not ashamed of who I am anymore, so I don't have to be, I guess I don't have to hide that, I don't have to govern myself as much when it comes to how I present myself. Yeah.
I don't know if this counts as self-governance, because it's almost unconscious. I think it's more so just the way that males are raised in society, the way that females are raised in society, and the way that you get used to speaking. But I consider myself, I'm still exploring my sexuality, but I think at this point I consider myself pansexual. And I just started thinking of myself in that way, even though I don't really like to think in terms of categories, because that's very limiting. But it's very automatic for myself as a young lady to say, oh, that guy's so hot, and oh, I wish I had a boyfriend, or I miss having a boyfriend. Even though I have been attracted to women, I don't go around saying,